Nobody from my family came to my wedding. The next morning, Dad texted asking for 8,400 one barn sent one. 3 weeks later, he showed up with cops at my house. The front row on my side of the chapel sat completely empty. Not a single seat was taken. 10 minutes before the ceremony, my best man checked the parking lot one last time. He came back inside, looked at the floor, and quietly shook his head. My father didn't come. My mother didn't come. My older brother, Julian, didn't bother to text. They had made their stance clear 6 months earlier, when I refused to sign over my maternal grandfather's estate share to fund Julian's failing commercial gym. My father told me, verbatim, if you don't support your own blood, you don't exist to this family. I went through with the wedding anyway. I stood at the altar, held Clara's hands, and made my vows with an aching hollow in my chest. But when I looked into her eyes, I made a silent promise to leave the dead weight behind forever. We spent the night at a quiet downtown hotel. At 6:14 a.m. the next morning, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from my father. No congratulations. No apology for leaving 30 chairs vacant. Just a single brutal message. Your grandfather's old property tax assessment came in adjusted. Since you claimed the deed, you owe the back estate fees. It's $8,400. Send it to my account before noon so I can settle the county clerk. I stared at the screen in the dim morning light. I knew property law. I knew the deed had been fully settled and probate cleared over a year ago. The county didn't issue random delinquent notices through third parties on Sunday mornings. Julian's gym lease was overdue. Dad was simply trying to shake me down before I left for my honeymoon. I opened my banking app. I typed in his routing number. I entered the transfer amount, 1 zeros. In the transaction memo line, I typed 2 words, final payment. Then I hit send, switched my phone to airplane mode, and never checked it for the rest of the week. 3 weeks passed. Clara and I returned home, unpacked our bags, and settled into our routine. I thought the silence meant they had finally accepted the boundary. I was wrong. On a Tuesday afternoon, heavy banging shook my front door. I opened it to find 2 uniformed county sheriff's deputies standing on my porch. Right behind them stood my father, his face flushed red, clutching a thick manila folder. Step aside, son, the older officer said calmly. We're here on a reported grand theft and fraudulent title claim. My father pushed forward, his voice trembling with manufactured rage. Tell them, Dad barked, pointing a finger directly at my chest. Tell them you forged grandfather's signature on the secondary trust and stole Julian's legal inheritance. I gave you the chance to settle the tax shortfall with the $8,400 and you sent a $1 insult. The deputies looked at me, hands resting casually near their utility belts. Sir, your father has filed a formal complaint alleging fraudulent conversion of estate assets, the officer explained. He claims you withheld key probate disclosures. I didn't yell. I didn't flinch. My heart rate didn't even spike. Officers, give me 2 minutes, I said quietly. Step into the foyer. I walked over to my desk drawer and pulled out a certified stamped legal binder. I didn't hand them grandfather's will. I handed them the forensic audit report my probate attorney had finalized 4 months ago. Officer, I said, pointing to page 7. My grandfather didn't leave the estate to Julian because Julian had already taken his share. In 2021, my father held power of attorney while grandfather was in assisted living. The deputy adjusted his glasses, scanning the highlighted line items. My father systematically drained $142,000 from grandfather's private medical trust, I continued, looking directly into my father's widening eyes. He funneled every cent into Julian's business accounts. Grandfather discovered it 2 months before he passed. That is why the will explicitly severed them and transferred the final deed to me. The color completely drained from my father's face. That's private family accounting, Dad sputtered, his voice cracking. That has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with this, I replied cold and steady. I agreed not to file criminal embezzlement charges last year out of respect for my mother. But I kept every bank trace, every forged withdrawal slip, and grandfather's signed affidavit of fraud. I turned to the lead deputy. The $8,400 he demanded was extortion to cover Julian's default notice. Check his folder. There is no county tax lien. The deputy took my father's manila envelope, opened it, and pulled out the generic printouts Dad had brought. The officer's expression hardened immediately. Mr. Vance, the deputy said, turning toward my father, you used our department to enforce a false civil claim while actively concealing prior financial fraud. Wait, let me explain, Dad stammered, stepping backward onto the porch. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. The click of the handcuffs was the only sound on the street. My father looked back at me through the squad car window, his eyes wild with panic, realizing he had walked straight into the trap of his own arrogance. I stood on the porch, watched the cruiser pull away, and quietly closed the front door.